the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. And how are you?
I'm good.
I have a nephew who is going to be 11 this year, and so my kid brother is one of the most emotional people that I have ever met in my entire life. And a subset of that is his little tiny human that he's created, who is also emotional, but in a much different way. He is more emotionally in tuned with what's going on, and he absorbs everything. And sometimes it's surprising when I hear him make comments about things that an adult perhaps would not have understood that he would be able to take in the way that he did. And it got me thinking about how there's a lot of children of first responders who experience the job, not necessarily in ways because things have been discussed at home, but just because kids absorb stress and routines and emotional shifts in a really unique way when it comes to living in a first responder household.
Yeah, I think we forget all the time of not only the inquisitive nature of kids in general, but they're going to feed off of emotion and the physiological responses towards things. So I saw a video recently. I was in training all week, and it's very interesting to really watch this. It's a mom with a baby, like an infant who's sitting in a high chair, and the mom's happy and smiling and laughing with the baby, and the baby's engaging with her and smiling and pointing and like really being responsive to the mom. And then she turns away and then comes back, and she's very stoic, not making any physical gestures, not just being very, very like almost having that RBF to her. And the baby's trying to smile and point and do the same thing of getting that emotional response from the mom, and she's not reacting. Eventually the baby starts crying, and I think because the mom's not responding, and then she has to switch it to once the baby's crying, she changes that. And I think that's a perfect example of how kids can really absorb even if we're not saying specific things, if they can't understand what's being said, they're judging off of our emotional responses towards things, and they're reading characteristics.
I've seen that video, and I always wondered why it hasn't been updated and why the quality is still from the 1990s.
I know.
So the psychological concept that you're talking about is actually called emotional contagion in family systems. And it refers to how emotions and nervous system states basically transfer within close relationships. And children are especially attuned to those nonverbal cues, meaning that they often sense that tension, the fatigue, or even the stress when the parents remain silent about things like their work experiences or what's going on in their day-to-day. It doesn't necessarily have to be verbalized.
Yeah, and I think from that early stage, we start absorbing that, like the reading of people, the kind of, this is what's going on, and whether it's good, bad, or ugly, whatever it may be, they start picking up on that. And that's like one of the first things we start learning is, vibing off of someone else's vibes.
It's so interesting. I told you about my brother and my nephew, and there couldn't be a better example of emotional contagion than them, because when my little brother is on one, my little nephew is basically mimicking him in every single way, because he'll be a little bit more bratty, or he'll start acting out, or he'll talk back to his papa, or he'll get disciplined in some way because his behavior is just off. And I think it's great to be able to understand different ways that this might transpire in kids when it comes to the stress that first responders experience, even if they don't mean to be bringing things home.
Yeah, and I think, when we come home and we show up and we're not our normal selves, we shut down physically, and we're just kind of separating ourselves because of it was a hard day or it was a stressful day, whatever you plug in the type of day it was here. But our kids are going to inevitably start feeding off of that and respond in the same way that we do to these instances, because they're learning from us. I think on a regular basis, kids are always observing anything and everything that's going on, and making it as it like a routine based thing of it's okay to be able to respond that way.
Another example of this, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a first responder home. I remember my dad worked so hard when I was growing up, and he wasn't home a lot because he was providing for us. And there were times where he might make mention of certain things, whether it was like a fire that started on the job or a scaffolding accident. And I remember as a child, the anxiety around the safety of my dad's job, so much to the extent that I even got anxious about him driving the 2 to 5 hours in LA traffic every single day. And I've mentioned to you, Clint, that I put a little toy horse inside of his lunchbox every day when my mom was making his lunch because in my mind, it was like my dad's going to bring this box back home with my horse.
Yeah. And it's finding little things like that that we do, especially as kids, or I still doing those things as adults. It's you have to bring this back. So I'm going to put something in your lunchbox so you come back. It's giving ourselves that reassurance to make ourselves feel better in that situation, even though we can trust our parents, ourselves in their training, our loved ones, whoever it may be.
And you know what I just shared, that was definitely a sign as a child, but there are other things that you might want to pay attention to see if kids are feeling the impact. I think too that they might start to ask questions indirectly. Curiosity shows up really subtly in some kids, or maybe they struggle with routine changes because the inconsistency can feel super destabilizing. And I think too that they carry quiet worry about the safety even when you keep reassuring them.
Yeah, and I think when we give that reassurance, they're still feeding off the physiological response if there's something going on. And, there's those times where you come home and the kids are like, okay, we better leave dad at home. Like I can think of specific instances where I could tell my dad came home and it was a hard day. It's like, okay, we better leave him alone. Let's go outside and play, compared to staying inside to bug him or whatever it may have been.
I think that just like the stressors that are going on in a household, kids can also pick up on at a certain age when parents aren't being completely honest with them. And I think it's important that for one solution here to just offer age-appropriate honesty because it helps to build that clarity and the trust. Yeah,
when you start doing that, you're teaching them to be able to articulate what's kind of going on. And the biggest, it's important, like you just said, is the age appropriate response. You don't have to go into the weeds of what's going on, but having that age appropriate response and being able to let them understand of what's going on, that's going to teach them for future reference in their future relationship, whatever it may be, to be able to have those tools in their tool belt to combat those issues when they arise.
Remembering when I was a kid, something else that I think would have been really helpful here is to just create predictable family rituals. And I think consistency fosters safety. So there were a lot of times to where we had things going on, like having fast food once a week on Fridays when my dad got home from work, for example. Like that seems so minute, but it was that consistency that you look forward to. Like, okay, dad's leaving. I'm not going to see dad for a while. He'll come home on Friday. We'll get to go and have our fast food. So small rituals like that, I think, are really important.
Yeah, because once you have this routine, we are routine people or routine things. We thrive in that routine, and routines work both ways. Like it could be a bad routine or a good one, but being able to have those things to look forward to and to get out of that normal, it's teaching the kids, ourselves, to be able to break out of that, almost having that pattern interrupt on a regular basis.
I think too that we can learn to name emotions without necessarily detailing the trauma. Understanding reduces anxiety. So an example of this would be having an open conversation with your kids and kind of pinpointing the way that they're feeling and naming those emotions. And it doesn't mean that you need to explain, okay, you're feeling sad because dad is working graveyard right now.
Yeah, being able to have that conversation with kids is, it's being able to not only understand the emotion, but be able to embrace what the emotion is and your response to it.
Something really cool that you've probably noticed is that a lot of first responders have kids that are also first responders. And I think one of the main reasons for that is not necessarily because of the job itself, but when you are a first responder, you learn certain ways of living that help you to become a little bit more strong and adaptable and resilient. And I think that that's a key as to why a lot of first responder kids end up being first responders too, because in a traditional household, you don't necessarily have what would be a consequence of developing those types of traits, especially at a young age. And when you do at a young age, then it helps to be able to kind of instill it in you. But then you put in the reps as you grow and you become older. And it is not a easy job to be a first responder. Most people don't do it. However, when you have this kind of conditioning, I think that is one of the reasons why we see that repetitive career.
Yeah, and I think we start, that becomes your normal, and you're able to break out of that traditional cycle of, because you're able to embrace it so much more, because that's what you know.
I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.